Now, normally I would be on camera to tell you about this news in regards to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, or just anything with the remake project, but why would you want to look at my goofy face when you can look and stare for however long this video is going to be at this beautiful cover art of a new novel by Kazushige Nojima, the man himself, the man who wrote Final Fantasy VII and is writing the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, called Dear Destiny, a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth novel. And just look at it. So many different references that you can see in this cover novel. Unless you are very into the shipping culture of Final Fantasy VII, you probably will notice a lot of different references to both Cloud and Tifa, as well as Aerith and Zack. Now, of course, you can disagree with me on that portion of this video, but just look at it. You have the two different skies divided by that beam, right? You have the night sky, which is a reference to Tifa and the water tower promise. You have Aerith connected to more of a sunnier, more brighter sky, similar to Aerith and the church, and Zack, both of them looking up at the sky and wanting to see the sky, not the steel sky that they have been seeing in Midgard. And its resemblance to the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth cover, right? But you also have Tifa sitting high on top of that beam, again a reference to the water tower scene, and then you have Aerith down below, where it's a reference to the church and her looking up, trying to see that bright sunny sky, right? And then you also have the Buster Sword that both Cloud and Zack had and owned, at least Zack owned it before Cloud, and it being just really perpendicular to both Tifa and Aerith. It's such a great reference to both the Cloud and Tifa ship, as well as the Aerith and Zack ship, and it's just such a beautiful cover. Now, you're probably wondering what exactly is going to be the topic, the plot. What is going to be written in this novel? Well, we don't exactly know specifically what is written, but according to the description of this book, which by the way is going to be released on January 30th, 2026, it's going to focus on the events and kind of like similar to Traces of Two Paths, separate stories of Tifa and Aerith right before the main story starts. So based on what we know so far about what happens with Tifa and Aerith before the main story starts, Tifa's section likely will revolve around not only a continuation of what happens in Traces of Two Paths after she, owns Seven Heaven, but likely the moment where she finds Cloud just comatose or, just having a full Mako poisoning happening at the train station. In Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, you kind of see what happens, but it's likely going to go more in depth into that, specifically since this is going to start the Gears of Fate, according to the description of the main story of Final Fantasy VII. And you have also Aerith's story, where the description talks about how when the wings have been clipped, which I'm assuming is going to be about Angeal, and of course Zack's connection to Angeal, and likely it's going to revolve around her writing letters to Zack and the moment that she feels that Zack died. And I think that's going to be part of her story. Her story is a little bit, I don't know exactly what Nojima is going to focus on, so that's going to be interesting to see exactly. But I think for the most part, I think if I had to predict correctly, at least Tifa's part, it will probably be about the train station. But this is great news for those who are big fans of Traces of Two Paths. Now, if you have never read Traces of Two Paths, I highly recommend it. It goes into so much detail about the story of both girls, how they grew up, what events occurred, like what happens to Tifa after the Nibelheim incident, and Aerith about her growing up with Elmira, and just overall just great insight into the backstory of these two girls, these two heroines, right? And Dear Destiny looks like it's going to follow the same path. It's a sequel to Traces of Two Paths, and it's going to connect probably to that, as well as what happens before the main story, such as what it says in the description, the Gears of Fate. And overall, I think this is going to be a great read, especially if you're a fan of both girls like I am. And I like the fact that Nojima himself constantly keeps reminding people that these are two heroines. These two girls are the heroines of Final Fantasy VII. They do two different things, but they both share that same role. And I think if you are still one of the individuals who try to claim either Tifa or Aerith are separate or like only one heroine of the story and so on, I think you're trying very hard to try to prop up your favorite character instead of recognizing that they're both equal in terms of the overall story of Final Fantasy VII. And of course, if you feel that way, I can't tell you not to feel that way, but I think with Nojima saying this once again, that these are the two heroines of the story, I think at some point you have to evaluate like what and how you view both of characters, because they both play important roles. They're different roles, but they both play important roles to the main story of Final Fantasy VII. Another section of this book is going to go into detail about Cloud's life as a Shinra soldier or a Shinra grunt. And maybe it might be somewhat related to the previous short story that Nojima wrote a while back called 2000 Guild to Becoming a Hero, which you can read for yourself. I'll post a link down in the description below, and really goes more into detail about Cloud's life after he leaves Nibelheim as a Shinra soldier. So I wonder exactly if it's just going to just be that, or are we going to get more details about Cloud? Maybe we might get Cloud's perspective while he was in Nibelheim during that incident. Who knows? But I think that's also going to be fun to read, and I hope it's more than just 2000 Guild to Becoming a Hero just plastered into the book. I hope it's into more detail about just Cloud and his perspective and his life as a Shinra soldier. I think we need a little bit more in depth about all of that through Cloud's perspective, not through a third party or anything like that, but actually Cloud, because I think Cloud's perspective is going to be very unique in the way we view him as a character, especially because there's so much mischaracterization, misinterpretation about Cloud himself. So hopefully that section of Cloud in this novel is going to go more in depth, because I would love to read more about that. Now, one other thing I want to discuss is that this looks like, and this is my personal opinion, that it might be the starting point of the marketing for Part 3. Part 3 is getting, I think, very close to being completed. We know that Hamaguchi has stated that there's a lot of Part 3 that is very playable, and that they're still working on it, but a lot of it is very playable. Now, we didn't get anything from the recent Sony State of Play, but I think most of us predicted that we might see something at the Game Awards. We did see something concerning Rebirth at the Game Awards, but that was more closer to the release date in 2024. But I think we're going to start seeing more marketing for Part 3 now, especially because they just announced this novel. When Tracer 2 Paths was announced, it first came out in 2021, but the English localization didn't come out until 2023, which then led into 2024 with Rebirth coming out. So I think this is more than likely, I will probably say, if I had to give a percentage, 75% chance that we will finally see a teaser of something of Part 3 at the Game Awards. 2026 is going to be the huge marketing campaign for Part 3 with a 2027 release date. Whether it be in January or sometime in that year, I think is the best chance for Part 3 to come out, especially because it's going to be the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. Now, I could be completely wrong, and marketing probably won't start until maybe second half of 2026, maybe at the Summer Games Fest. But I think with this announcement and the fact that it's coming out really soon, January 30th, I think there is a large possibility this is the start of their marketing campaign for Part 3. Because I think what they're going to, or at least what Nojima is going to show us or tell us in this novel, is going to be connected to Part 3, similar to how Tracer 2 Paths was connected to Rebirth, right? Because in Tracer 2 Paths, you have a scene where they discuss about what happened, or like they discuss like their backstories and stuff like that in different points of rebirth. So I think that's going to play into parts of part 3. So this is exciting news, especially if you're a fan of Tracer 2 Paths. I cannot wait to read Dear Destiny. I don't know when the English localization will come out for this. It did take 2 years for the English localization of Tracer 2 Paths to come out, but hopefully Dear Destiny comes out sooner rather than later. And I think if they really want to capitalize on the marketing for part 3, they'll probably release it sometime later in 2026. So I cannot wait to read it, cannot wait to see what new information we have, even if it's not shipping related. Any sort of like new stuff concerning Final Fantasy VII is always great, especially from Nojima himself. So I cannot wait. Again, this is such a beautiful cover. It's so good. Both heroines are so great in the story of Final Fantasy VII, and I cannot wait to read more about them. And if it is going to be very shipper related, or heavy on shipping, I think it can also essentially tell us exactly where they're going to go with at least shipping purposes within part 3 of Final Fantasy VII Remake project. So let me know what you think. Are you excited for this Dear Destiny? Let me know. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of my coverage of Part 3 of Final Fantasy VII Remake project. And I cannot wait to see what awaits us in Dear Destiny. Alright? Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day, night, whatever. Alright? Bye-bye.